Stop whatever you are doing, because what you are about to hear is not a drill, not a simulation, and not the kind of geopolitical speculation that gets walked back by morning. At approximately 0347 hours Zulu time, 3 United States Navy vessels operating in the Strait of Hormuz were boarded, seized, and are now under complete Iranian military control. 2 Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyers and 1 amphibious assault ship carrying 2,000 United States Marines are no longer under American command. The sailors and Marines aboard those vessels are not missing, not unaccounted for. They are physically detained by Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps naval forces in what represents the most catastrophic single strategic humiliation in the history of the United States Navy since the capture of USS Pueblo in 1968. The number of American military personnel now in Iranian custody exceeds 2,000. That is not a preliminary estimate subject to revision. That is the confirmed headcount of United States service members who woke up this morning as the cutting edge of American naval power projection and will go to sleep tonight as prisoners of the Islamic Republic of Iran. The White House Situation Room has been in continuous session for the past 11 hours. The president has been presented with exactly 2 options by the Iranian supreme leader, delivered through Swiss diplomatic channels because direct communication between Washington and Tehran remains severed. Option 1 is immediate and total withdrawal of all United States military forces from the Persian Gulf, the dismantling of every American base from Kuwait to Bahrain to the UAE, the permanent end to naval freedom of navigation operations in the Strait of Hormuz, and formal recognition of Iranian sovereignty over the entire waterway that carries 30% of the world's seaborne oil. Option 2 is war. Not the surgical strike scenario that Pentagon planners have been gaming for 2 decades. Not the limited engagement that keeps escalation contained. Full-scale war between the United States and Iran, with the lives of 2,000 American service members hanging in the balance as human shields against American retaliation. If this channel has been giving you the analysis that cuts through the noise of official narratives and mainstream defense commentary, now is the moment to make sure you never miss an update. Subscribe, hit the notification bell, and share this video with everyone in your network who is serious about understanding what is actually happening at the sharp edge of global power competition. What unfolds over the next 72 hours will determine whether American military credibility in the Middle East survives, or whether 3 decades of uncontested naval dominance in the Persian Gulf ends, not with strategic defeat in combat, but with strategic surrender under duress. Tonight's analysis takes you inside every dimension of this crisis. The tactical sequence of events that allowed Iranian forces to seize 3 American warships without a shot being fired. The weapon systems and operational capabilities that Iran deployed to achieve what every naval strategist said was impossible. The strategic calculations being made right now in the Pentagon, in Tel Aviv, in Moscow, in Beijing, as the world watches to see whether the United States will fight for its detained forces or accept terms that amount to complete strategic capitulation in the region. The global implications of either choice and why this single incident represents the most significant test of American resolve since the Iranian hostage crisis of 1979. The seizure operation began at 0332 hours local time, when USS Porter and USS James E. Williams, both Arleigh Burke-class destroyers equipped with Aegis combat systems, were transiting the narrowest section of the Strait of Hormuz, approximately 17 nautical miles southwest of the Iranian coastal city of Bandar Abbas. The vessels were operating in international waters under freedom of navigation protocols that the United States Navy has maintained in these waters for decades without interruption. Accompanying them was USS Bataan, a Wasp-class amphibious assault ship carrying the 24th Marine Expeditionary Unit, 2,000 Marines equipped for rapid deployment operations anywhere in the Middle Eastern theater. At 0318 hours, both destroyers experienced what naval warfare specialists term total sensor suppression. Every radar system aboard both vessels went dark simultaneously. Not degraded, not jammed in the conventional sense where operators see interference patterns and noise. Completely dark, as if the systems had been physically severed from power. The SPY-1D phased array radars that form the backbone of Aegis, defensive architecture stopped receiving and transmitting. The navigation radars went offline. The fire control radars that guide SM-2 and SM-6 interceptor missiles to their targets ceased functioning. Within 18 seconds, both destroyers were operating blind in waters where Iranian anti-ship missile batteries sit less than 40 miles away on the northern coastline. The electronic warfare attack that achieved this effect was not broadcast jamming of the kind that American warships trained to fight through. This was precision electromagnetic pulse targeting using capabilities that Western intelligence agencies assessed Iran did not possess. The IRGC Navy deployed EMP weapons mounted on fast attack craft that closed to within 2,000 meters of the American destroyers before the crews even knew hostile vessels were approaching. Without functioning radars, the lookouts on both destroyers never saw the Iranian boats until they were alongside. What happened next violated every assumption about American naval supremacy that has governed Middle Eastern security architecture since Operation Desert Storm. Iranian special forces from the IRGC Navy's commando units boarded both destroyers using grappling equipment and scaling ladders, while the crew struggled to restore sensor capability and power to defensive systems. The boarding teams numbered approximately 40 personnel per destroyer, armed with suppressed weapons and operating with assault coordination that demonstrated months of rehearsal for this exact scenario. Within 12 minutes of the first Iranian boot touching American deck plating, both destroyers were under Iranian control, with their crews detained and confined below deck. USS Bataan attempted to maneuver clear and establish communication with 5th Fleet headquarters in Bahrain, but the same EMP weapons that disabled the destroyers were deployed against the amphibious assault ship. With 2,000 Marines aboard but no functioning communications equipment and no radar coverage to detect the swarm of Iranian fast attack craft now surrounding the vessel, the commanding officer faced an impossible tactical situation. Attempting to fight would mean opening fire on Iranian vessels at close range with zero situational awareness and no ability to call for support or even to confirm what was happening to the destroyers that had been operating alongside. The decision was made to avoid casualties and comply with Iranian orders to cut engines and prepare to be boarded. By 0347 hours, all three vessels were under Iranian military control. The total elapsed time from initial sensor suppression to complete capture of 3 American warships was 35 minutes. Not a single shot was fired by either side. There were no American casualties. There was also no American resistance because the technical capabilities Iran demonstrated made resistance operationally impossible. The weapon systems Iran deployed to achieve this seizure represent capabilities that Pentagon assessments claimed would not be available to regional powers for another decade. The precision EMP targeting technology that disabled Aegis combat systems requires sophisticated understanding of the electromagnetic vulnerabilities in American naval architecture and the ability to generate focused electromagnetic pulses with sufficient power to overwhelm shielding and hardening that is supposed to protect critical systems against exactly this type of attack. The EMP weapons themselves are mounted on Iranian-built Paykop-class fast attack craft, vessels that displace less than 100 tons and are constructed using radar-absorbent composite materials that reduce their radar cross-section to levels comparable to small fishing vessels. American SPY-1D radars are optimized to detect and track ballistic missiles and aircraft, not small surface contacts operating at close range in cluttered littoral environments. The Iranian craft exploited this vulnerability, approaching to point-blank range before triggering the EMP weapons. The electromagnetic pulse generators are based on Russian technology transferred to Iran through North Korean intermediaries over the past 18 months. The devices use explosive magnetic flux compression to generate pulses in the gigawatt range for microsecond durations, sufficient to induce catastrophic overvoltage in unprotected electronics while remaining focused enough to avoid damage to the attacking vessel's own systems. The technology is not new. The Soviet Union developed comparable capabilities in the 1980s. But the miniaturization required to mount effective systems on fast attack craft and the targeting precision required to disable specific vessel systems without causing permanent physical damage represents a significant advancement beyond what open-source intelligence suggested Iran had achieved. The operational capabilities Iran demonstrated extend beyond the EMP weapons to the coordination and execution of the boarding operations themselves. Seizing a modern guided missile destroyer at sea against a crew trained for exactly this contingency requires not just technical systems to neutralize defenses, but tactical proficiency in close-quarters combat and ship seizure procedures. The Iranian commando units that executed the boarding demonstrated capabilities comparable to American VBSS teams, moving through the vessels with speed and precision that prevented crew resistance before it could organize. The scenario that Pentagon planners refused to take seriously has now materialized in the most humiliating possible form. American warships, built at a cost of $1, $8 billion each, equipped with defensive systems specifically designed to operate in high-threat environments, have been captured intact by an adversary operating small boats and asymmetric tactics. The technological superiority that American naval doctrine assumes as a given has been negated by weapons costing a small fraction of the systems they defeated. The immediate operational consequences are catastrophic for American military posture throughout the region. Fifth Fleet headquarters in Bahrain is now operating with the knowledge that Iranian forces possess the capability to disable and seize American warships operating in the Persian Gulf. Every remaining American vessel in the region is potentially vulnerable to the same tactics that succeeded against USS Porter, USS James E. Williams, and USS Bataan. The Navy's response options are limited to either withdrawing all vessels from the Gulf, accepting vulnerability to future seizure operations, or attempting to develop and deploy countermeasures to Iranian EMP weapons on timelines measured in months while operating in hostile waters right now. The strategic situation facing the White House is unprecedented. 2,000 American service members are in Iranian custody. Unlike the 1979 hostage crisis, where the captives were diplomatic personnel seized on Iranian sovereign territory, these are military personnel seized in international waters in what constitutes an act of war under any conventional interpretation of international law. The Iranian ultimatum is explicit and non-negotiable. Complete withdrawal of all American military forces from the Persian Gulf in exchange for the return of the vessels and their crews, or military action to recover them by force, with the explicit Iranian promise that any rescue attempt will result in the execution of all American prisoners. The Pentagon has no viable military option for recovering 2,000 personnel held aboard 3 vessels now anchored in Iranian territorial waters under the protection of shore-based air defense systems and anti-ship missile batteries. A rescue operation would require amphibious assault against defended positions, air superiority over Iranian territory, and the ability to extract 2,000 personnel under fire while preventing Iranian forces from executing prisoners as American forces approach. No such capability exists. The operational plan does not exist because the scenario was considered too unlikely to warrant serious planning. The political ramifications extend far beyond the immediate crisis. Every American security guarantee in the Middle East is now subject to question. If the United States cannot protect its own warships operating in the Persian Gulf, how credible are American commitments to defend regional allies against Iranian aggression? Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Kuwait, and Bahrain are all hosting American military forces on their territory based on the assumption that American military power provides effective deterrence against Iranian threats. That assumption has been destroyed. If you want analysis this sharp, this deep, this willing to challenge official narratives, subscribe now to ensure you never miss an update. The next 72 hours will determine the future of American power projection in the Middle East, and this channel will be tracking every development that mainstream coverage is too compromised to acknowledge. Israel is watching this crisis with existential alarm. The demonstration that Iranian forces can disable and seize American warships fundamentally alters the military balance in any future conflict between Israel and Iran. If American vessels equipped with Aegis defensive systems can be neutralized by Iranian EMP weapons, then the entire architecture of American military support that Israel depends on in any scenario of regional war is now in question. The Israeli assessment being communicated to Washington through classified channels is unambiguous. If the United States surrenders to Iranian demands and withdraws from the Gulf, Israel will act independently to eliminate Iranian nuclear facilities and military capabilities regardless of American objections. Russia is observing American paralysis with strategic satisfaction. For 2 years, Russian strategic planners have been developing operational concepts for neutralizing American carrier strike groups using asymmetric methods, including electromagnetic warfare and swarming tactics by small craft carrying precision weapons. The Iranian seizure operation validates these concepts and demonstrates that American naval supremacy is far more fragile than Pentagon talking points acknowledge. The Russian Navy is already integrating lessons from this incident into operational planning for potential conflict in the Baltic or Black Sea regions. China is analyzing every technical detail of how Iran achieved total sensor suppression against Aegis-equipped destroyers. The PLA Navy faces the same challenge in any Taiwan scenario: how to neutralize American carrier strike groups operating in the Western Pacific. The technologies Iran deployed are directly applicable to Chinese operational requirements. The political lesson China is drawing is equally significant. American military credibility is hollow when tested by adversaries willing to escalate beyond the limited frameworks that American planners prefer. If Iran can seize American warships and hold their crews hostage, then American threats to intervene in a Taiwan crisis carry less weight than previously calculated. The global order implications of either American response are transformative. If the United States launches military operations to recover the seized vessels and detained personnel, the result will be full-scale war with Iran, with oil prices spiking to levels that trigger global recession, and American forces engaged in sustained combat operations with an adversary that has been preparing for this conflict for decades. If the United States accepts Iranian terms and withdraws from the Persian Gulf, the result will be the end of American military hegemony in the Middle East and the establishment of Iranian dominance over the world's most critical oil transit choke point. The choice facing American leadership is between unacceptable options. Fight a war that will be extraordinarily costly in lives and resources with no guarantee of success, or accept a strategic defeat that ends American power projection in the region and signals to every adversary worldwide that American military might can be successfully challenged through asymmetric tactics and willingness to escalate. Every regional actor is repositioning based on their assessment of which choice America will make. Saudi Arabia is initiating diplomatic outreach to Tehran through Omani intermediaries, preparing for a future where Iranian regional dominance is the reality that must be accommodated. The UAE is quietly suspending military cooperation initiatives with American forces, hedging against the possibility that hosting American bases will become a liability rather than a security guarantee. Turkey is accelerating its independent regional strategy, sensing opportunity in American strategic paralysis to expand influence in areas where American withdrawal will create power vacuums. Pakistan is reassessing its delicate balance between American partnership and regional alignment, calculating that Iranian success in confronting American naval power shifts the regional balance in ways that require Islamabad to prioritize relationships with Tehran and Beijing over increasingly unreliable American security architecture. The weapons and tactics Iran employed represent capabilities developed specifically to negate American military advantages, while avoiding direct confrontation that would trigger overwhelming American retaliation. This is asymmetric warfare, optimized for the precise strategic context of the Persian Gulf, where geography favors the shore-based power, and where American reluctance to accept casualties creates vulnerabilities that can be exploited through hostage scenarios. Subscribe to this channel because in a world this dangerous, analysis this sharp is not optional, it is necessary. What unfolds over the next days will determine whether American power in the 21st century follows the trajectory of British power in the 20th century, a seemingly unassailable position eroded through accumulated humiliations until the pretense of dominance becomes unsustainable. The historical parallels to the 1979 hostage crisis are impossible to ignore, but the strategic context is fundamentally different. In 1979, American military forces were not directly challenged. Diplomatic personnel were seized on Iranian territory during revolutionary upheaval. The crisis damaged American prestige, but did not directly challenge American military credibility. This crisis is different. American warships have been seized in international waters. American military personnel are being held hostage. The challenger is not a revolutionary government in chaos, but a sophisticated military power that planned and executed an operation that neutralized American technological advantages through precise exploitation of systemic vulnerabilities. The world will never be the same after this night. Either American military power will be restored through combat operations that demonstrate continued willingness to fight for detained forces regardless of cost, or American military credibility will suffer damage from which it may never recover, as allies and adversaries alike internalize the lesson that American power can be successfully defied when adversaries are willing to escalate beyond American comfort thresholds. There is no going back. There is no diplomatic solution that restores the status quo ante. History will mark this moment as either the beginning of sustained American military operations against Iran or the end of American hegemony in the Middle East. What is your assessment of where this goes from here? Has this night permanently altered the Middle Eastern power balance, or will Washington find a way to reassert dominance? The comment section is where this community processes events that official channels cannot explain. Your engagement keeps this work independent and sharp. Stay sharp, stay ahead, and never stop asking the questions that matter.